Hello, everyone. Warm welcome to this session on unified data governance and with Azure Purview. Today, we have with us Gaurav Malhotra, who's a seasoned product manager, a technical leader, and a strategist. He's an expert in strategic planning while using agile and lean methodologies. As a product leader at Microsoft, he has shipped multiple scalable distributed data governance and data analytics solutions. He has helped Fortune 500 customers in different domains of power of governance and analytic, resulting in three times increase in revenue. Thank you, Gaurav, for coming here today.
Yep, I'm glad to be here.
We also have with us Uday, who is a collaborative engineer by profession with 15 years of substantial experience in executing, building, and managing the product that solved some of the complex business problems using large scale data of all types and sizes, batch and real time, structured and unstructured cloud. Uday is a strong believer in knowledge sharing, enabling the partner developer ecosystem and thriving communities. So, a warm welcome to Gaurav and Uday from our side. And I'll now leave the stage to both of you.
Can you guys see my screen?
Uh,
No, Guru.
yes,
Looks
we
like it
can.
is loading now.
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Great. All right. So, welcome everyone. Like I said, my name is Gaurav. I have Uday with me, who will be helping me monitoring the chat and moderating that. So, for today's session, what we'll be doing is we'll be talking about what are some of the data governance challenges that we are seeing working with our customers, and how is that industry moving in terms of data governance, right? And we're going to talk about then what is Azure Purview. And then with respect to Purview, we have certain capabilities around our platform, the applications on top of that platform with catalog insights. I'll walk through the slides fairly quickly because I want to spend most of the time showing you guys the actual product in action. Then we'll talk about how the governance part comes together, excuse me, with other Microsoft products, right? So with respect to the integration that we have, there are a bunch of customers, as I mentioned, who are already successful on Purview. There are certain customer stories that I have that I can share with you guys. Then we'll spend a little bit of time on the roadmap and how you can essentially get started with Purview, if you will. So with that, I will jump into the first part. Now, one of the big things that most of you are aware is that there is an explosion of data that is happening today. And in fact, by 2025, IDC predicts that data is going to grow to 175 zettabytes. So the takeaway from this slide is that the volume, variety, and velocity of data keeps on increasing, and data is the most strategic asset that a company sees today on how they can use that data to gain intelligent insights in their organization. So then if you think about from a governance standpoint, there are two ends of the spectrum that we see working with the organizations. On one end, there is a discovery piece where organizations are looking to understand what data do they have, where did that data originate, can they trust that data? And towards the other end of the spectrum, there's this compliance piece to understand the risk profile of the data, the exposure to risk, who has, how do they control access and use, whether it is governed by a particular regulation or not. And this is essentially this emergence of new role called chief data officer, which we are seeing in the organizations, and this role is becoming increasingly interdisciplinary. So a lot of organizations are looking to centralize data discovery so that they have a single view of data rather than creating multiple silos. And similarly, from a compliance standpoint, understanding the risk profile of the data so that they can be compliant within the usage boundaries, they can be compliant to GDPR, STRIMS that is coming up now. So now if we take these challenges and see what are some of the elements that are required from a successful data governance standpoint. Now, the biggest piece is, as I mentioned, the data landscape continues to grow, right? With the explosion of data sets, with IoT data, operational data, and all coming into the picture, and almost every single device today being connected to the internet and generating some sort of the data, the landscape for data keeps on growing. And then I said that, like, as the data is growing, right, you want to make sure that you have a single view of data. What that means is that if you have a data set that you're looking in your organization, then you don't want that finance. Like, let's say if they're looking at a customer data set, then finance and marketing both should be looking at the same copy rather than them maintaining different copies for their data lakes and creating those operational silos. Now, once you overcome those operational silos, you by in turn create agility in your ecosystem with respect to data. And then, as I mentioned, finally, for you to be successful in terms of data governance, you have to comply with industry regulations. You have to make sure you are GDPR, CCP compliant, if you will. Now, with Azure Purview, we have this service that went to GA in October of last year. We were in preview for quite some time. And with Azure Purview, we are enabling unified data governance, allowing customers to maximize the business value of data. Now, the biggest piece is that this service was born in the cloud, right? So by from get-go, it is a managed service in Azure that allows you to reimagine data governance in the cloud. The biggest piece with data governance is to first understand what data you have and where does it reside. Is my data all in a SAP instance? Is it in a Teradata instance? Is it in cloud in Amazon S3? So to be able to understand where your data is one of the foundations of effective data governance, because everything starts with the understanding of that data in your organization. As I mentioned, once you do that, you want to maximize the business value of data, because you want to make sure, excuse me, the people like information workers or business analysts, they're able to understand, they're able to get the maximum business value from the data, right? Because they want to consume those in their analytical processes, or data scientists want to consume that in their data science processes. And then finally, Azure Purview allows you to gain intelligent insights into your data state. Now, as a chief data officer, which is a persona that we're working to serve here, you want to understand how's your data distributed in your data estate. Is it all in a SAP instance? Is it in a Teradata instance? So to gain those insights, and also like insights like from a compliance standpoint, you want to understand the risk profile of the data, right? So all of those are insights that you want to understand, and then you always have the underneath data set available, because you must have some additional KPIs that you want to generate in an organization. So to be able to take that and kind of generate those insights is also one of the key use cases with Azure Purview. So if I were to take that and kind of explain all of that in a picture, what does it mean to do data governance with Azure Purview? Now, on the left, as I mentioned, from get-go, we have embraced the hybrid nature of the data state, which means data could be on-prem, multi-cloud, SaaS sources, operational sources. And we have these scanners that are going out to the hybrid data state and building this platform, data map, which is part of our Purview platform. And think of this data map as a graph where we're capturing key pieces of information like technical metadata, semantic metadata, and business metadata, and much more. And then there are applications on top of this data map, starting with the Purview data catalog, which allows you to consume information in the map. Right? If I can ask people to just mute themselves if you're not speaking, it's just so much background noise coming. Thank you. It allows you to browse and search information in the Purview data map. And it also has a full-blown business glossary experience, which allows you to define your business terms and then stamp that business metadata onto assets in the map, and then consume that business context to use that business context to consume information from the map. And then, as I mentioned, there's another application called Data Insights, which from a chief data officer perspective, or the office of chief data officer, you want to essentially understand how's your data distributed across your data estate, or what is the risk profile of the data. You're able to gain those intelligent insights. Now, Purview, all these applications are surfaced through our app called Purview Studio, which I'll give you a sneak peek once I show you the demo. And Purview as a service is tightly integrated with other services like Synapse, SQL Server, Power BI, Azure SQL. Okay, so The way to think about Purview is that it's a horizontal play, which means that you have your operational databases, you have your IoT data, you have your analytics layer and business intelligence layer, and then Purview is across, right? Which means your data is governed from get-go. That's how you should think about Purview and unlocking the power of your Azure data services with Azure Purview. Okay. So now, if I were to now kind of explain those different pieces in the block diagram that I showed you. So the first one is the Purview data map and catalog, right? Now, data map, as I mentioned, is our platform, which is essentially kind of laying the foundations for your effective data governance as the scanners are running. It enables automated data discovery, classification, and lineage interaction. It includes technical metadata, the business metadata, semantic metadata, and it's an extensible models. And this is one of the key pieces to understand for you guys is that with our data map that is a part of our Purview platform, it is fully conformant with open source Apache Atlas. Okay. So today, with our sources, we support 48 sources and we are on a very aggressive journey to double and triple those data sources. In fact, we have an industry-leading partnership that gives us 100 plus connectors, and we are just on a incremental journey to light those up in our stack. And you should think of these sources, like the 48 that we support, as system types. And why do I say system types? Because as I mentioned, that we are fully conformant with open source Apache Atlas APIs, which means that for these 48 sources that we support out of the box, we have already defined the system types in Atlas. And Atlas is a typed system. But let's say you have a customer who's trying to use, let's say, IBM Informix, which we today do not support. So you can go in Atlas and define a custom type called IBM Informix and use the Atlas APIs to push and pull information from our data map. And you'll see that the applications on top, like the catalog or insights, they work just as good as they would work with system types. They would work with custom types as well. Now, in fullness of time, we will support IBM Informix as well. But this is a very important point from an extensibility standpoint that it does not block you today from using Purview if a connector is not supported, or if you're working in an organization that has, a native data source, which is just very limited to that organization. So you can always define a custom type in Atlas and use those open APIs to push as well as pull information into the map as well. So it's a very important point. Then there is the automated data discovery and classification. As I mentioned, that we have these scanners that are essentially scanning your hybrid data state and building this data map, which is a graph. So the way to think about data discovery is that we support hybrid data scanning, right? And we support scanning behind a VNet, on-prem, multi-cloud, SaaS sources. And here, the way we reach on-prem is through a piece of software called self-hosted integration runtime. Now, if you guys are familiar with Data Factory or Synapse, this is the same self-hosted integration runtime, which was earlier limited to do data movement. Now it has been extended to do data discovery and classification and your scanning metadata with Azure Purview. Okay. And the other key point to understand here is that when you go and provision Purview, you're provisioning the Purview data map, which is today available in a bunch of regions. But what we stored in the data map is only metadata. Okay. And the only time we touch actual data is when we are doing the classification exercise, which is this part where we support data classification and labeling. So we have 200 plus classifiers out of the box across different domains like personal, government, security. Pretty much everything around the world is supported. And here you can bring your own classifiers as well. So you can come in and say that, oh, I have this transaction ID column in my database and I want to represent the semantics of that using a regular expression or a data dictionary. So all of that is supported. Now, the key part here is that only during the classification time, we touch the data, and that we take a sample of the data today and we do intelligent sampling over there. But the point I wanted to make is that underneath our data map, Purview data map service, there is a data scanning service that sits in, which is live in 23 regions covering 12 geographies. Pretty much every major geography is covered. Now, let's say your Purview data map is in central US and you're scanning a storage account in Australia. Now, in that case, we are smart enough to automatically instrument the service in the Australia, the scanning service in Australia region, where we'll do the classification exercise. We take the data in memory, do the classification, and discard the data. Your data never flows back. The only thing that comes back is metadata. So it essentially basically ensures that data sovereignty and all of those with that. Okay. Then there is lineage extraction. So one of the key use cases with Purview is to paint a picture like this, where you have your raw data in, let's say, a SQL table. There's some copy running into storage, some transformation running in a data factory or a Synapse pipeline. It is going to your warehouse or to your presentation layer in Power BI. So to be able to stitch this end-to-end lineage, both at an object level, also at a column level, is one of the key use cases with Azure Purview, because a lot of time you want to do things like impact analysis, right? That if I were to change this column X, what impact will it have downstream or upstream? Or you want to do root cause analysis. So data factory pipeline failed and you're able to understand what caused that failure to happen, right? So to be able to do that root cause analysis is also one of the key use cases here. And then from a programmatic interface standpoint, we have the visual interface with the Purview Studio, but APIs, SDKs is all supported. We are working to release PowerShell commandlets this month as well. In next 3 months, there is work happening on the Terraform part as well. So a lot of work happening on the is already live or happening on the programmatic interface front. So that's the automated data discovery and classification. Okay. So the next piece is around what is we call as the Purview data catalog. So this is the application on top of the platform. Now, once your information is in the map, you want to consume that information, and that's where data catalog comes in. It is in this search. This is backed by an Elasticsearch index, which means it is blazing fast. It gives you suggestions, intelligent recommendations. You can search or you can browse. There's a full, as I mentioned, business glossary experience as well, where you can define your business terms, you can define your definitions, you can associate those business terms with physical assets in the map, you can do lineage visualization, or you can do workflows as well. So we just launched a feature last week where you can define self-service access workflows. So let's say you discover a particular asset like a storage file, and you think that this is what you want to work with. So you can request access right from Purview. It will trigger a workflow called a self-service approval workflow in the back. We'll send an email to the owner. The owner will approve it and you'll get access. Or you have a policy defined which says every FTE in the organization is auto-approved. So in this case, it will check for that policy and automatically approve it, and you'll get the access to that data set. Right? So it's a very important piece that we have made live last week. And then there is work that's in progress for business rules, where essentially, imagine you want to apply a glossary term based on some logic, right? So you'll be able to define a business rule and do that application. So that's data catalog. Then there is data insights, as I mentioned, the second app, which is essentially to be able to get a bird's eye view of your data state. You want to understand how's your data distributed. You want to understand what business terms you use in an organization, or how are those business terms applied to assets. You want to understand from a classification and labeling standpoint, what is what sensitive data exists in your organization. Is it all credit card information? Is the credit card information available in storage, or is it in SQL? So all of that you're able to understand. And then there are other out-of-the-box reports that we are working on around data location and movement. So if you're doing copy of the data, if you're copying data across geographic boundaries, all of that is something that you'll be able to see with these insights as well. Now, before I go into the demo, I want to see if there are any questions that I can help answer, if you will, or if all of those are being answered by Uday.
Yeah, Gaurav, so one question from Abir. That's a very broad question, so I could not respond in chat. So his question is, in startups like us, there is a lot of fragmented data. How can Azure Purview help us manage and analyze in a better manner? While helping us all the data at one location.
Yeah,
So
sure.
in a way, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, so this is
sorry, go on.
essentially, this is the key part, right? Like when I show you the demo, you'll be able to see that uh, depending on if the source is supported, or as I mentioned, you can define a custom type in Atlas and use APIs to push information. What you are doing with Purview is that you're creating that centralized data map. And that centralized data map, that is why you're just going to have one Purview account per organization, because they're going to push that information into that central data map. And then in your AML workspaces, or in your Power BI workspaces, or in your Synapse workspaces, you'll have a Purview powered search, so that now you can search across your entire organization, because there's a central copy that is powering all of that search information. So that's the whole point and the key use case with Purview. In fact, when I talk about customer stories, Illimity Bank in Europe, or Grundfos, or Heathrow Airport, they've exactly done what you just asked for, where they are scanning data from different sources, so that it gives them appropriate signals to handle, disruptions of flights and all of that. So that's what basically Purview is about, to be able to create a central copy, a centralized data map, if you will, or where all of that information is stored, so that your data developers or business analysts can consume that information. Any other question?
Um, no, Goro, maybe you can jump onto the demo part.
Great. So just like any other Azure service, you can provision Purview as well. I won't go into the steps of it. It's pretty straightforward. You pick your subscription resource group, and you provide a name, and you just land onto page. I mean, you can provide other settings around VNet and all of it if you have all of that configured in your environment. If not, it's like a three-step process. Once you provision, you land onto a page like this. You can click Open Purview Studio, which takes you to the home page of the Purview catalog. And here you can see that I've already cataloged millions of assets across a bunch of sources, and defined some business terms as well. And you can start to consume information from the map using this search box, which I'll come back to in a minute. And then you could manage your business terms. You can browse assets. Now, here you're able to do that because I'm a super admin, right? And hence I'm able to do all of this. But it's totally dependent on the role that you have in Purview, right? So if you're just a reader, then all you can do is just browse assets and nothing else. These are some of the recently accessed items, some quick links for you to get started. Now, before I show the consumption part, let's see how easy it is to populate the Purview data map. So I'm going to jump into this data map section. Just minimize it for a second. You can see here that I've chosen to organize my data map by data centers using a concept in Purview called collections. And you can have a collection inside the collection. This is the root collection, which is basically the name of your Purview. And then you can have a collection inside it and further collections down. It's fully flexible, totally up to you. Here, I've chosen to organize my data map by data centers, but it is totally up to you on how you want to do that. Now, collections as a concept allows you to accomplish two things. A, it allows you to organize your data map. B, it allows you to control who has access to see what in your organization, which means, let's say here, like I said, I chose to organize it by data centers, but if I organize it by, business functions like finance or marketing, now let's assume this is a finance hierarchy. Now, here I could have sources that have some sensitive data that I do not want my entire organization to see. So I could actually lock it down and say control access with collections, so that I can see I can enable who has access to see what in my organization, right? So it's a very important point because it allows you to do fine-grained access control. And again, this is all about metadata. I'm not talking about controlling access to data. I'm talking about if I go use Purview and I search for an Oracle account, and if that Oracle account isn't under their Azure Europe hierarchy and I've locked it down to only, let's say, Gaurav, then no one else in the organization will be able to discover that Oracle server or any tables underneath that Oracle server. Okay, that's how you should think about it. Now, in terms of sources, if I click register, you can see that we are starting our multi-cloud journey with Amazon S3. There's Amazon RDS supported as well. Pretty much everything in Azure is supported. We do have BI tools like Power BI Looker. We have the SAP instances. Snowflake is supported. Salesforce, on-prem SQL Server, Teradata, all of that is supported. And as I mentioned, we are pretty much adding new connectors almost every month, and we'll continue to double and triple this over the next 6 to 12 months. Okay. Now, one thing that I do want to mention here is that a lot of our customers do not do point-wise connection. What they do is they come and scan hierarchies, well-known hierarchies like Azure, right? Where you can just come and register a subscription, and then we do the heavy lifting of bringing all the storage accounts or your SQL instances or your Cosmos DB collections under the governance umbrella of Purview. Not only that, we'll keep that up to date as well, because we are continuously listening to Azure ARM change feed, which means if you delete a storage account, your Purview data map will be automatically updated as well. And we are not only limiting this to Azure, but also to other well-known hierarchies like AWS, where you can again just come and register an account ID, and again we'll do all the heavy lifting of determining all the S3 buckets, all the RDS instances, and bringing them under the governance umbrella of Purview. Now, once you have registered your source, now setting up a scan is super easy, right? So if I were to show you one for, let's say, a data lake, right? So if I click this, I can essentially see the scan history, the collection path, the hierarchy of that particular source, and I can always click new scan and try to set it up. You can see that we do not store credentials. We are fully integrated with Azure Key Vault, which means we get credentials on the fly and connect to it and then discard it. You can always do test connections or do sanity checks to make sure that you're able to connect to the source. You can scope your scans to say that I only want to scan a portion of the data lake rather than the entire data lake. Then you can define your scan rule set. And basically what you are saying in the scan rule set is that when this scan runs, I want you to scan all these file types. And then these are the classifications, as I mentioned, that we have 200 plus out of the box across different domains like government. Here, pretty much everything in the government is around the world is supported. Finance, where again, all the routing numbers or the credit card numbers for all major countries in the world is supported, and other domains as well, right? And again, we will continue to expand this with more system classifications. And as I mentioned, in this case, it doesn't exist, but you could bring your own classification as well. It's totally up to you. Okay. Once you do this, now there's a default one for per source, but you can define your own scan rule set as well, where you can say, oh, I only want to scan a CSV file as part of this scan rule set. So you can define your own scan rule set as well. Like in this case, we have done some customization over here. Okay. Now, if I choose this, the default one, I can then specify the frequency, how often I want this scan to run, and that's it. Boom. So it's a truly serverless infrastructure, which means all you do is you come and register a source, you set up a scan, in less than 5 minutes, you are able to accomplish this. And we spin up the infrastructure, we scale it up and down to give you the best in class performance here. So now we have populated the data map. Let's just see how easy it is to consume information from the map. But before I go there, I also want to show you this business glossary experience where we have the business terms. Like if I search for sales, I can show you this market development and sales term, which has its name or definition, what assets on the catalog it is mapped with. I can show you the synonyms, the related terms, the children for it. Like you can define a hierarchy, who is the expert and data steward for this. All of that is supported with this. So now let's come back to data catalog and start to search information from the map. Now you can see your recent history. Now let's say I want to see the impact of a marketing campaign that we ran on sales. As you saw that as I type this term, system is automatically giving me suggestions. It is automatically able to relate this term, business term, to physical assets in the map. And if I hit enter, I can further filter it down by object types or by a collection or by any classification, which is the sensitive data that it found, or by a contact, Microsoft Information Protection label, or a business term. Okay. Now let's just say I want to filter it down by a business term. The sales order header looks interesting to me. I can click that and start to look at more details for this particular asset. And by the way, for us, everything is an asset, whether it's a SQL Server, it's a storage container. Everything is an asset for us. Now you can see the classification at a table level or at the column level. Again, the hierarchy, the business term that is associated with this, the collection path. You can look at further basic and advanced properties, if you will. You can look at the entire schema to say that this is the column name, this is the classification, the sensitivity label, which is basically what you know as Microsoft Information Protection Label. So you go to your a Word document or your Outlook email, and you say something as confidential. Now, these are the same Microsoft Information Protection labels, which were earlier limited to the Office ecosystem, have now been extended to your entire data state with Purview. So you can extend it to your columns, you can extend it to your SQL columns or Cosmos DB collections. Pretty much all sources are supported. Okay. Then you can look at the lineage information, right? So you can say that this particular table is being fed into, this particular copy activity, which is generating this SQL table, further copies happening and generating a storage file. And you can do it at an object level and also at a column level as well to say how are these columns flowing. You'll able to understand as well, again, to do root cause analysis or impact analysis. You can look at the experts and owners for this asset, and then you can browse it in a hierarchical manner, just like you would do this table in a SQL Server Management Studio. You're able to do this, and this works both for structured as well as unstructured data. Okay. Now, let's say I was a data scientist. I was searching for this, and I found this data set. I looked at this property schema, and lineage, and said, yes, this is a data set that I want to work with in my Power BI workspace. We have these open-in experiences built in where you can open it up directly in your Power BI workspace. We'll create the pbits file. You will just have to connect to the data set and you can start to work on it. And so these are productivity improvement experiences that we have enabled for you guys to start using. Now, in addition to that, as I was mentioning earlier, you can click request access and request actual access to this particular table as well. And behind the scenes, what it is going to happen is, if I go into this management center, expand this and show you that there is a self-service access workflow that we have created, which means that when you request access, it's going to trigger, and this is a workflow, and you can see the similarity between this and Power Platform, right, where you can build these workflows, Power Automate. So this is exactly right. Underneath the hoods, we're using Power Automate and exposing that for you to build these workflows in Purview. Now, you can always customize these as well, right? So if you want to change this, you can change it, you can edit it and all. And think of these as the out-of-the-box templates that we are enabling for self-service access workflow. We also have a workflow for business term approval, which means if you want to define a new business term, you can create a workflow for it so that if anyone defines a business term, it triggers an email to the owner. The owner has to approve it before that business term takes effect. Okay. So now once the request gets raised, it comes into this place where it is waiting for your response. You can say, yeah, I want to approve this or I want to reject it. And that's how the workflow would complete. And then you can see the entire history of your request that you approved or denied over here. Okay. So that was how you relate all of this to workflows. Now, the next part here is now that I have consumed information from the map, right? Now I want to see as a chief data officer, what are some of the insights that I can see in my data state. Now, as I mentioned, we have these asset insights where as a CDO, I can understand my data is in SAP instance or a table storage or a Power BI workspace or a data share instance. So I'm able to understand all of it. How many assets do I have? How many were classified and all of that. I can see my scan information to say what scans were run, what have been successful. I can look at my glossary information to say what business terms do I have, how are those business terms tagged onto assets in the map. Again, I can look at the classification information to understand what are some of the assets that exist, how have they been classified. And one of the great things with these views is that you can start from top level views. Like for example, in this case, we discovered these classification. You can click view details, let's say US phone number. I can look at the actual instances, which is actual assets where this was applied, right? So you can start from top level views, go down, and kind of do the deep dive and understand all of that as well. And then there is information about labeling and all of that stored here as well. So these are the out of the box insights. Now, obviously, we are working to add more, but what we also expose is data sets that power these insights, which are available through our APIs, which a lot of our customers today use. And they take that particular data set because there's always going to be an additional KPI that you want to enable in your organization. So they would essentially take that data set, build the KPI, build customized dashboards, and enable that for their organization. So a lot of our customers today do that as well. So this was a quick sneak peek of the product. So basically, I showed you how easy it is to populate the map, how easy it is to define business terms, how you can consume information from the map with this search box, and how, as a chief data officer, you can understand how is the data distributed across your data state, and then there are different types of reports as well. We also touched base on the the workflow pieces, which is around the self-service access workflow. We touched upon a business glossary workflow as well. So different types of workflow again that we enable, as I mentioned. Like again, if I were to just very quickly show you, you can author new workflows. And today we support two types, which is one for data catalog and one for governance. And then with respect to data catalog, you can create, delete glossary term, import terms, update a glossary term, or with data use governance, which is around the access part, you can create a data access request, the self-service access request workflow as well, right? So think of these as out-of-the-box templates that we are enabling for you. But think of workflow as a platform capability where in future, like along with these out-of-the-box templates, you can build your own workflows as well, and then attach it to your data governance processes, if you will. So I'm going to take another pause here and see if there are any other questions as well.
Yeah, Gaurav, one question is this is from Satak. Um, so his question is about unstructured data. Can Purview help in structuring the unstructured data?
Yes, definitely it can. So the way to think about Purview is that it works with both structured and unstructured data, right? Now the question is which source you're looking for. Now, if you have unstructured data in storage account, today we are able to scan your Azure Blob ADLS Gen 2, and we are able to scan all the file types, if you will, and we'll be able to catalog those, and we'll be able to essentially expose the column name, column definition. So essentially bring it into a tabular format and provide all that information to you. In addition to that, we are also doing some smart things, right? Because if you think about an organization where they're using storage, for example, it's pretty much a set pattern of what these applications kind of generate. So they'll do, let's say they do mmdd YY and put a file for that day in that particular folder. So YY mmdd. So for every day, a file goes in there. Now we have this concept called resource sets, which is going to detect this. And instead of cataloging every file in every single partition, it is going to create an aggregated thing in Purview catalog, which we call as the resource set. And let's say files like that were 700. So it is going to have the count of file type. We'll be able to see, understand what all files were detected as part of it. So essentially, these all are smarts that we have built that prevent you from polluting the data catalog, because there's no value of cataloging same type of file which is going to have the same metadata every day, right? Because your storage account could have billions of files, if not. Does it answer the question?
Yeah, I'm sure this answers Satak's question. Satak, feel free to unmute yourself just in case if you have any follow-up question. In the meantime, let me take the another question from Shubham. This is from Shubham Gupta. His question is it possible to create a balance between data management and transparency? How effective is Azure Purview in avoiding security breaches?
Yes. So it is
Interesting
definitely
question.
possible, right? Because that is what we are trying to accomplish over here, that you are able to catalog and create that centralized data map. And then as an organization, you're able to access that information. So you're able to access assets or data sets which you didn't even know existed in your organization. And hence, I keep on repeating the word centralized data map. It's important that it's a single purview account and you are not creating fragmented maps, which means not separate as purview accounts for everyone in the organization, but there's a single purview account and then there is a centralized data map, which is where the value comes in and hence help you with data management.
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav, for answering that. Yes, Shubham, just to conclude that answer, right? Unless you know the data, how can you do those, safeguarding or avoiding those security breaches?
Yes.
So this is essentially the first step in understanding your data landscape, data real estate. Yeah,
Yeah. And that's where I say, right, that understanding your data, it is kind of laying the foundations for effective data governance. Because unless and until you know what data you have, other things, like as you would imagine, right, today we have a data catalog, we have data insights, but there are a bunch of other things that we are doing in terms of, we already have things like self-service access policy in Preview, but tomorrow you'll be able to do more on the policy side. Like you'll be able to control access based on the attributes of data, and think of attribute as PII, right, which was stamped again onto your data assets by our classification engine. So all of those would be possible only if we understand what data exists in your data state.
right.
All right.
Um, yeah, there is another question from Lakshit. This is on tenant-based support, right? So his
Mhm.
question is, can I create multiple catalogs in my tenant?
Today we do not prevent you from doing it, so you could essentially have multiple purview accounts created, but that's the part that I keep on saying, that if you do that, then you are fragmenting your data maps, right? Because then you're saying that I have 5 purview accounts and I have 5 data maps, right? Now which information goes in which? First of all, how would you decide? And if you do that, then you are creating operational silos in your organization, right? Now, the reason why we enable that is because, like in some organizations, there is a need that for Europe, there has to be everything, even the metadata inside Europe, right? So you have to create like a global organization. You have to create one in Europe, one in, North America. So in those cases, you might need separate purview accounts, but again the value would come as one purview account if you have a centralized data map.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Lakshit, was there any specific reason why you are talking about multiple catalogs in a given tenant? Okay. I don't know if audience can unmute themselves and ask the question, but just in case, if you have any follow-up question, feel free to ping us, Lakshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Over to you, Gaurav.
Yeah, just moving on. So in terms of one Microsoft, right? Like if you think about Purview is the heart at the heart of all the other services from a governance standpoint, whether it is Power Platform, any Azure service, your multi-cloud SaaS sources or hybrid sources, your SQL Server, M365. So you should think of Purview as your centralized data governance pane, which allows you to understand data and eventually govern that data as well, right? And an example of that would be like if you were to think about Power BI plus Synapse plus Purview, right? So inside the Synapse workspace today, you have this Purview powered search now, which allows you to search across your entire data state. Because earlier, without this, you were only able to search local to your workspace. But now with Purview, you can do a search across and discover, like your data scientists or data analysts can discover assets that didn't even existed. They knew that existed in their organization. Okay. Similarly, with Power BI, you're able to scan your entire Power BI tenant and catalog those reports and dashboards inside your Purview as well. Then similarly with M365 case and Azure Purview, right? So earlier, again, as I mentioned, these Microsoft information protection labels were only limited to your Office ecosystem with file, Word documents, SharePoint, and all. But now they can be extended to your entire data estate, which means SQL columns, Cosmos DB collections, and all with Azure Purview as well. Okay. So if I were to provide you reference to some customer stories, and these are all publicly available in our documentation as well. One of the most recent one is Heathrow Airport, where again they're able to use Purview to kind of centralize data discovery. So they're scanning different sources, creating that centralized data map. And the way it allows them is that helps them is that it allows them to gain some insights into how each function is operating, right? Which ultimately helps them in improving the efficiency and kind of predict disruptive behaviors in flight patterns and all of that, right? So they've been using Azure Purview and very successful with it. Similarly, Grundfos, which is a pump manufacturer, and again, this Danish pump manufacturer earlier was using Excel and doing all manual stuff to understand what data they existed. But now they've been able to use Purview again to do centralized data discovery and classification and reap the benefits of it. And on a similar pattern, Illimity Bank as well. Now, in terms of features and roadmap, right? So the way to understand is that there is a Purview data map. And then there is, which is our part of our platform, and then there are different applications like the catalog and the insights, and then there are a bunch of integrations we have with other services. Now, all of these pieces are generally available, which means your automated scanning of your hybrid sources, your Amazon S3, the data classification piece that I showed you, the Apache Atlas API support, which gives you a great extensibility hook. From a catalog standpoint, ability to browse and search, to define your business glossary, bulk import. If you have existing glossaries, apply those business terms to assets in the map. The lineage part that I showed you, and then these are all generally available. The data insights piece today is in public preview, which we're working to GA very soon. And then in terms of integration with Synapse Workspace or your Power BI Workspace or your SQL Server, Azure SQL is in GA. And then the Microsoft Information Protection one, which I just showed you, the labels one, is in preview. And then we are working to make that generally available as well. So this is a quick sneak peek of our features and roadmap of what's in progress and what's coming. And then for you guys to get started, there are a bunch of resources that we have where you can understand about Purview, you can look at our documentation, you can give us feedback, and we track that very closely to understand what feedback is coming from the community. We have a blog where pretty much we are publishing things almost every week as we're releasing new features. And then you can always get in touch with our community, with our engineering team through this discussion areas as well. Now here, like I highly encourage you guys to subscribe to this particular blog that we have. Because as I mentioned, like we are pretty much releasing new features almost every week, and every time a feature goes out, there's a blog here which allows you to understand more and more about Purview and then the incremental additions that we are doing to it. So that was pretty much what I wanted to present. I wanted to leave good amount of time for any questions that you have that might come. So at this point, feel free to ask any questions if you might have.
I didn't see any other question. There was a question on soft delete. I have answered that in line. Like that is a Azure Files feature, right? Through Azure Files, we offer that soft delete so that just in case if there is something mistakenly deleted, user can able to recover.
Yep.
Apart from that,
Well,
Vijay says, yeah. Nothing. So that was not a question. Yeah, he's saying it is truly cloud native governance data product. Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Yeah, we can connect to RDS and S3 from AWS, in addition to all the Azure data sources. And in fact, as Gaurav was saying, bunch of other sources as well, Snowflakes, SAP BW. Yeah, please subscribe to that blog that Gaurav was pointing to. we are enhancing our connectors, and we are growing month on month.
Great. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much for giving Uday and me an opportunity to present. I hope we guys were able to give you an overview of Azure Purview, some information about how other customers are using it, where do we see industry going with this, what are the challenges they are facing, and hopefully talk a little bit about the roadmap as well, and then how you can get started. So thank you so much again for giving us an opportunity. It was really awesome.
Thank you very much, Gaurav, and thank you, Uday. So we look forward to having you here again. Thanks a ton.
Thank you guys. Bye now.
So much. Thanks. Bye bye.